Viewer discretion is advised.
To protect the world from devastation.
To unite all peoples within our nation.
To denounce the evils of truth and love.
To extend our reach to the stars above.
The dark. I was born in it.
Hello everyone, and welcome back to the channel. If you haven't done so by now, please be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and share. And if you'd like to go a step further, tap the notification bell. That way you'll be updated each and every time I'm uploading something new. Thank you for tuning in for another episode of True Crimes. Tonight, we'll be exploring the mysterious disappearance of Daniel Robinson. The 24-year-old geologist, originally from South Carolina, moved to Arizona for work. Daniel Robinson went missing on June 23rd, 2021. So it's been about 5 months, guys. Wow. Daniel was last seen leaving a job site in the desert of Buckeye, Arizona. Daniel was officially reported missing the same day. According to his father, local law enforcement seemed to drag their feet, making statements like Daniel is a grown man and can come and go at his leisure. But the father insisted that this was not his son's usual behavior, and something must be wrong. Due to the lack of seriousness from law enforcement, the father, family, friends, and co-workers began to conduct their own investigation into Daniel's disappearance. It wasn't until the father was able to organize volunteers and get some much-needed media coverage that law enforcement began to take this matter seriously. A whole month later, a rancher tending to his property would find Daniel Robinson's vehicle wrecked in a ravine with all his personal belongings, but no sign of Daniel or evidence of where he might be. Let's dive into this a little bit further. I'm not gonna lie, this is a crazy fucking story. So let's get into the minutiae, shall we? Alright now guys, I will be reading an article from The Insider. As a disclaimer, all of my source material that I've used in this video, their links will be in the description box for easy access so that you guys can read at your own leisure if you're interested. Also, because there are no current updates to the disappearance of Daniel Robinson, most if not all of my source material is several weeks old. Daniel Robinson, a 24-year-old geologist living in Arizona, has been missing for over 3 months. We've already established, guys, it's going into 5. Again, source material is kind of old. Buckeye Police Department continues to search for the young man who went missing in late June. According to Robinson's family, he never went more than 6 hours without speaking to his family or without telling someone where he was going. When they hadn't heard from him in at least that long, they knew something was wrong. Robinson's father, David Robinson II, told CNN. He also claimed local law enforcement initially took too long with the case. I think the quick action wasn't there quick enough, he said. From the day that I arrived in Phoenix, Arizona, I have done more to find my son than the law enforcement agency whose jurisdictional authority covers where he was last seen and where his vehicle was recovered. Robinson II told the local NBC affiliate 12 News in Phoenix. Robinson was last seen leaving a job site near Sun Valley Parkway and Cactus Road on June 23rd. Since his disappearance, the Buckeye Police Department has worked with outside agencies to search more than 70 square miles in an effort to locate Daniel. Investigators have utilized UTVs, cadaver dogs, and air support, including a drone and a helicopter. Buckeye PD said in a statement on September 16th. Robinson is 5'8" and around 150 pounds, according to a GoFundMe page set up by his family to help finance efforts to find him. He has dark brown eyes and black hair and was born without a right hand. When Robinson arrived at work at 9 a.m. on June 23rd, he met with Kenneth, a co-worker, who told Buckeye police he was acting strange. According to the police report, Robinson was saying things that did not make sense, like asking Kenneth if he wanted to go home to Phoenix to rest. After about 15 minutes of this, he waved goodbye and abruptly left the work site where the pair was located. Kenneth contacted Steve, the project manager, who said no one from the company had heard from or seen Robinson throughout the day. Around 3 p.m., Kenneth was made aware that Robinson had not been located and was not responding to texts and calls from work and family. At that point, Ken started to look for Robinson in the desert. Ken followed tire tracks he said were Robinson's near the work site where Robinson was last seen. Heading west, he tried to locate Robinson as he drove further into an extremely large desert area. Police then searched that area for hours with no success.
Earlier this week, we had a conversation about the Gabby Petito case and the lack of coverage for missing people of color. It's called Missing White Woman Syndrome. And boy, did that start a conversation. But despite how upset some people got about our mentioning this aspect of media bias, with a hat tip to the late, great Gwen Ifill, people are now paying more attention to some of these other cases, like Jelani Day, who was reported missing in Illinois in late August. Sadly, his body was identified yesterday. It had been in a county morgue for weeks. His family criticized police for dragging their feet in trying to find him. And there's the case in Arizona of Daniel Robinson, who has been missing for 3 months. The 24-year-old geologist was last seen leaving a job site in the desert. Nearly a month later, his Jeep was spotted overturned in a ravine only a few miles away. According to police, his cell phone, wallet, and keys were found with the vehicle. They say no foul play is suspected. But Daniel Robinson's father says police have dropped the ball in the search for his son. As a result, he's hired a private investigator and is taking up the search himself. David Robinson joins me now. And Mr. Robinson, I am so sorry for what you're going through. I have children your son's age, and so this one hits me hard as a mom. So let's talk about this. I noticed your story after the whole conversation started about missing white woman syndrome. Lots of people started tweeting your story and your petition to me. And that is how I found out about it, not through mainstream media, not through local news. Tell me your son's story. Your son went out to Arizona, and then what happened?
Well, my son, he graduated from the College of Charleston in Charleston, South Carolina. Straight out of college, he came out to Arizona in Tucson to take a final class. From there, he landed his job in Phoenix here with Matrix New World. He was very happy to be here in Arizona, mainly so because he's a geologist, and they gave him the opportunity to, work his profession and also the things that he loved, do the things that he loved.
So when your son went missing, how long did it take before the last time you heard from him and when you said, okay, he's just not calling? Young people sometimes won't check in. When did you make the connection that this is something other than him not just checking in?
Well, my daughter, she lived in Phoenix also. The people from his job came over there to her apartment, notified her that they was looking for. Of course, she's going to call me or her mother. She called me about it. We didn't think anything too bad other than, he was starting not answer his phone. That was first unusual. After I realized it was from the time they say he was last seen at his job and the time that he was answering the phone, it ended up becoming 6 hours. But Daniel, that's totally unusual. He would never, ever get to that point.
And what did local police do when you contacted them? What did they tell you?
Well, they'll help her for the first day. They took the report. First, they told me I had to wait 12 hours, which is I was 3 hours off. I called back after the 3 hours. They took my report, and they also started asking questions around the job, to try to locate them that way. I think one of the officer crews went out and did a drive-through of the street area, not in the desert. I requested them to go out to look for my son. They told me, of course, he's a grown man. So, and it was at night also, so they couldn't go out. The next morning, I asked them the same question. Hey, can y'all please go out there and look for my son? The officer crew told me that they were going to go out there, but then he called me back an hour or so later and say it's been denied from the higher ups because he's a grown man and he has the right to leave if he wants to. From that point, I have an auntie in Philly who called, and I don't know what she said to them, but hey, she can't call me back and say, hey, they're going to send the Firebird out from Phoenix, Arizona. And that was the first search. But by that time, as soon as they told me the first time they were going out for my son, I was in my car already heading to Phoenix. By the time I got to Phoenix, that's when they was out on the 26th.
Yeah. And I mean, he has a right to leave if he wants to, but his car is overturned. They find his keys. They find his wallet. That's not somebody just heading off on a vacay or not deciding they want to go away. The circumstances surrounding your son's disappearance are so strange that it would seem to be sort of a natural story for media to pick up. Did you get the sense that local media, that people were taking an interest in his story due to all of these bizarre items that are associated with it?
Well, of course, I started my own search from 80 to almost 200 people. We've been doing it for 7 weeks. And in the meantime, I was definitely trying to reach out to the media. I was able to get some media coverage with the local news. I was desperately trying to get more coverage through, social media and things like that to try to get national attention because I wasn't getting anything from the Buckeye Police Department at the time. So I had to take matters in my own hand. It just took 3 months to do so.
And do you feel that the police have failed you in this matter?
Yes, I do. Yes, I do. And the biggest part is the urgency. I feel like if there was something taken seriously from day one, prime example is the Gabby story. Every situation should be handled the same way. I think first 24, 48 hours is crucial to finding someone.
Thank you for pointing that out, because I think also because he's a guy, not a young woman, and there's all sorts of factors into what people pay attention to. But you're absolutely right. Each of these stories should be treated with the same urgency. We wish you the best of luck. Please keep in touch with us, and we will also keep in touch with you and stay on top of Daniel's story. David Robinson, thank you.
All right, so now I'm going to read a little bit more of that article from earlier. A Jeep belonging to Robinson was found in a ravine on July 19th. About 4 miles from where he was last seen, according to CNN. The police department said the car had sustained significant damage. Robinson's cell phone, wallet, keys, and clothes were all found at the scene with his car. Police said foul play is not suspected, but Robinson's family thinks otherwise. It didn't sit right with me, his dad, David Robinson II, told CNN. Robinson II hired his own private investigator to help with the case. Evidence showed that Robinson was wearing a seatbelt at the time of the car crash. This looked like a staged event to me, said accident reconstructionist and private investigator Jeff McGrath. After the airbags came out, somebody turned that ignition over at least 46 more times. There's an additional 11 miles on the car, so that tells me the car was driven around after the crash. Buckeye Police Department said that leading up to finding Robinson's car, they had conducted 4 ground searches and 2 aerial searches. After finding the car, they conducted 2 more ground searches on July 21st. So I will now be sharing a clip with you guys. I'll also be reading from another article very briefly. Then we'll get into some commentary, final thoughts, and try to bring this
Daniel
all
Robinson
full circle.
disappeared on June 23rd in the far West Valley. He was last seen leaving his work site in Buckeye that morning. A month later, his Jeep was found in a ravine but there was no sign of Daniel.
Team 12's Josh Sanders spoke with the private investigator hired by Robinson's family, who has not given up hope of finding Daniel.
Jeff McGrath is an expert at reconstructing accidents, but says when he saw the state of Daniel's Jeep, something was off.
Immediately when I saw the vehicle, I noticed there was something that wasn't right with it.
On July 21st, nearly a month after his disappearance, Daniel Robinson's 2017 blue Jeep Renegade was found rolled over in a ravine. Just miles from his work site, the airbags deployed, and no sign of the 24-year-old.
The damage didn't match with the terrain and where it was laying.
Where's my son?
Daniel's father, David, brought in private investigator Jeff McGrath to piece together what led up to the crash. Buckeye police handed over the Jeep and their report from the vehicle's airbag control module, or ACM, showing what happened after the airbags were deployed. McGrath's team ran their own analysis.
After the airbags came out, somebody turned that ignition over at least 46 more times. That's not normal. We usually see one or two because it adds one when we download the box. We have to put power to it.
The ACM also records the vehicle's speed.
There's an additional 11 miles on the car since the airbags deployed. So that tells me the car was driven around after it crashed.
Buckeye police are now analyzing data from the Jeep's entertainment system connected to Daniel's cell phone. McGrath says the system shows the Jeep was involved in a collision around 1 p.m. on June 23rd, nearly 4 hours after he was last seen.
We have a gap in time and we don't know where he went, what was going on at that point. By looking at the photographs, it doesn't match the area. Sometimes those could be a staged event, and this looked like a staged event to me.
At this time, the department has no evidence to suspect foul play or a crime. McGrath does.
So as we can see, there are a lot of mysterious nuances that surround the disappearance of Daniel Robinson, which is why this case is so interesting. It was also stated that local law enforcement wanted nothing to do with this case because of all of the mysterious elements associated with it. And I hate to say it, there's probably a racial component that has to do with it as well. Especially as we continue to see staggering data that shows the difference in treatment law enforcement shows missing black people versus missing white people. And I'm not gonna lie, although I'm heavily aware of the racial disparities in this country, when you Google missing black people, the data that comes out with that simple search is mind-boggling. There is an obvious difference in treatment. We need to do better. I would also like to report that law enforcement and search parties have found several deep mining shafts that they searched but came up empty, with no sign of Daniel. Further research showed that while conducting this massive search for Daniel, more than 6 other human remains were found that were from previous missing persons cases. Law enforcement says they are confident none of those remains are that of Daniel Robinson. I would also like to add, what the fuck is going on in that desert? 6 other remains found. Wow. But are we really surprised when we know that Arizona borders Mexico, when we know that desolate areas are the places to turn to when we want to make people disappear? So again, I stress, law enforcement needs to be doing a better job. We talk about protecting and serving, but all I'm seeing here is a lot of bullshit and lack of interest in human beings. Alright, now it's time to introduce another element to this case. I'm unsure if one has to do with the other, but we have no choice but to report the facts as we see it, as we get it, honey. So now let's get into it, shall we? And I'll be reading from the most updated news report on this situation from News Nation Now. This story was updated October 8th of 2021. According to News Nation Now, the 24-year-old geologist Daniel Robinson was rebuffed by a young woman in the week leading up to his disappearance, according to police records. Police reports obtained by News Nation Now show Daniel Robinson had been texting with a woman named Caitlin. On June 22nd, the day before he was last seen, Robinson wrote his final message to her. "The world can get better. but I'll have to take all the time I can, or we can, whatever to name it. I'll either see you again or never see you again. On June 20th, he told the woman he loved her, but she did not respond to the message directly. Daniel Robinson met Caitlin while delivering for Instacart. He delivered liquor to Caitlin's home. She and her friend reportedly invited him in and they exchanged phone numbers. However, Caitlin said in the text that he showed up to her house uninvited multiple times after that. Honestly, you showing up at my house unannounced made me extremely uncomfortable, Caitlin wrote in a text to Daniel on June 20th. I will not be home today, but I don't see us hanging out anytime soon. A day after that, Daniel Robinson wrote, I'm outside of your place. She replied, ? Please stop doing that. I'm not even home. This is not okay, Caitlin responded. Robinson asked if she hated him. Her final message to Daniel on June 21st was, I don't hate you, but please leave me alone. All of the messages were turned into the police and were part of their initial report. Daniel Robinson's father also told police his son had mentioned being in love with a woman he didn't know anything about. Also, I would like to state, through more research, the co-worker Kenneth also told police that he had conversations with Daniel about a woman that he was in love with, but he couldn't have her. Also, it was reported that he exhibited a lot of strange behavior weeks leading up to his disappearance. A waitress at Waffle House told police that he seemed a little bit off. While Daniel was visiting his sister, she reported that he came in and sat silent for 30 minutes and then just abruptly left without a word. I'd also like to add, the day Daniel went missing, law enforcement encouraged his father to check Daniel's social media accounts. Apparently, Daniel deleted his social media accounts, including all of his pictures from Instagram. So if one were to take into account all of these elements surrounding the disappearance of Daniel Robinson, one could only be left to believe that he was indeed suffering from some type of psychotic or mental breakdown. Father continues to share with people that no matter what his son was going through, suicide or self-harm could not, would not, and cannot be a factor in his disappearance. In addition to this story, I would like to add that the private investigator stated in a previous interview that they received unsubstantiated reports that Daniel may have been spotted in California, but those claims have yet to be verified. This was linked to the idea that through Caitlin's rejection of Daniel, he may have spiraled into an unstable mental war within himself and either wanted to start over or do harm to himself. But then again, this is just speculation. And the father argues that he doesn't believe the encounter with Caitlin has anything to do with his son's disappearance and stands by his belief his son was not mentally unstable. So I find myself asking the same question as everyone else. What happened to Daniel Robinson and where is he? So here are some of my theories on what could have possibly happened to Daniel Robinson. At this point, it's safe to say that we can't rule anything out. Here are my final thoughts on the matter. If the evidence truly supports a staged scene as described by the private investigator, then I would also suspect foul play. Maybe he was chased. After all, Arizona does border Mexico, so cartel or racist bigotry could be a factor. I would also like to revisit the rancher. He was the first person to find the vehicle, and it was on his property. I would secure search warrants and lift every piece of sand. Maybe someone was aware of his unwanted advances towards Caitlin and planned to do something to him. Let's be honest here, guys. I hate to say it. I don't know if Caitlin's a white woman or not, but if I'm betting, more than likely she is. I don't have to go into great detail on my beliefs on that. You guys already know where I'm going. Hello, God. Also, if all of the witness statements are led to be true and Daniel was acting weird and borderline unstable, It could very well be believed that he did this to himself and walked out into the desert on his own, stripping himself of all he was, and went out into the unknown. Let's be honest, it's going on 5 months, guys. I hate to be a Debbie Downer, but without a feasible plan to escape the obvious dangers the desert brings, we could surmise that Daniel is indeed gone from this world. But nonetheless, we still need answers in this mysterious disappearance. The families deserve to know what happened to their loved one, and if he is indeed deceased, they at least need closure so they don't continue to suffer the inevitable what-ifs of it all. In closing, let's keep stories like this alive in hopes that justice will be served, and let's continue to pray that the families and loved ones find some semblance of peace. I really do appreciate you guys for tuning in to this episode of True Crimes. As updates come in on this story, like other stories that I've reported on and that I will continue to report on, I will bring it to you guys as it comes out. Again, thank you so much for your support. Continue to like, comment, subscribe, and share. Thank you all for engaging in the channel. Have a great evening. Be blessed and never stress. Bye.